Hello, and welcome back to Entering the Infinite, the Magic the Gathering podcast all about infinite combos. I'm your host, Aaron Bennick. And in 2 days, if I remember correctly, Innistrad Midnight Hunt officially releases to the public. I don't know about you guys, but I am incredibly happy to return to Innistrad for the third time now, I believe. I started playing Magic when Shadows over Innistrad first came out, and I am a huge Halloween person, so I like all the spooky stuff, vampires, werewolves, all of it. So I'm really happy to return to Innistrad. I'm especially happy that we finally have a functioning werewolf commander. The set looks really cool. I think there are a lot of interesting new legends. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of new combo potential, except for a very interesting legend that's for the Midnight Hunt commander decks. It is Wilhelt, the Rotcleaver. It's 2, a blue and a black for a legendary creature, zombie warrior. Whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. And at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do, draw a card. So, a lot of people are actually saying that this is the best zombie commander to come out in a long time. And I think, at least personally, it's a really good, probably the best zombie commander if you're going for a more combo build, which is of course what we do here at Entering the Infinite. So, without further ado, the main themes of the deck. Firstly, tribal. It's obvious. You have to play zombie tribal if you're going to play Wilhelt. Wilhelt cares about zombies in 2 different ways. He wants us to play zombies. He wants to get rid of zombies. We have to play zombie deck. The other main theme is sacrifice. So Wilhelt says whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. So he explicitly wants our zombies to die so that we can actually get more zombies onto the board. So we need ways to get our zombies off of the board so that we can put more power onto the board. And last but not least, we're going to have some graveyard synergies and a little bit of a graveyard theme, which is per usual with both zombie decks and sacrifice decks. And we're going to want some graveyard synergies to maximize on both of the other themes. Zombie decks really want you to bring stuff out of the graveyard. That's all of the zombie flavor that they like. And sacrifice decks, we're going to be sacrificing creatures, so we're going to want ways to get them back. So the main combo of the deck is going to have Wilhelt, and I've actually got a couple of combos written down here. So the first one is going to be a new one that actually works with some new Innistrad cards. It's going to be Wilhelt and Puppet Factory, which is the opposite side of Puppet Stitcher. So Puppet Stitcher is a new card from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. It's 2 and a blue for a creature human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Depending on how you build it, at least in my notes here, we don't have too many instants and sorceries, so that's probably not what the maximum value that you're going to be getting off the front side. But we're not playing it for the front side, we're playing it for the back side. So it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 3 or more creature tokens, you may transform the Puppet Stitcher. So then it transforms to Puppet Factory, which is just an artifact. Creature tokens you control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may transform Puppet Factory. So, how exactly does this go infinite? Well, Wilhelt explicitly says, whenever a zombie dies, if it didn't have Decayed, you create a zombie with Decayed. But the Puppet Factory gives all of our creature tokens base power and toughness +3/+3, but it also removes all their abilities. So you sacrifice a zombie, Wilhelt triggers, it gives you a 2/2 with Decayed, except the Puppet Factory says it doesn't have any abilities, so it technically doesn't have Decayed. So you sacrifice the token that you make, Wilhelt says you get another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. So you need Wilhelt to flip the Puppet Stitcher into the Puppet Factory, and you just need a way to sacrifice your creatures. So the second combo is, you might already be guessing it, it's a very classic zombie combo. It's Gravecrawler and Phyrexian Altar. So Gravecrawler is a single black for a creature zombie. It's a 2/1. Gravecrawler can't block. You may cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. And Phyrexian Altar is 3 mana for an artifact. Sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. So if we have this in conjunction with Wilhelt, then we have the ability to actually make infinite 2/2 zombies with Decayed. If we have it with something else that drains life, which I'll talk about a little bit later, all of our opponents lose life, depending on some other sacrifice synergies that we have. All sorts of different things can trigger. So Gravecrawler, Phyrexian Altar gives you infinite sacrifice triggers. And then I didn't write down a third infinite combo. That's right. You can put up to 3 infinite combos in this deck. All I really did was I just wrote down Rooftop Storm. So Rooftop Storm is 5 and a blue for an enchantment. You may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast. So the reason that I didn't actually write down a specific combo with Rooftop Storm is because it adds so much. It slots into so many different combos that there are just too many to write down. For instance, Gravecrawler, Phyrexian Altar with a Rooftop Storm means that you get infinite sacrifice triggers and you get infinite mana of whatever color you want, because you can cast the Gravecrawler from your graveyard by paying 0 to the Rooftop Storm and then sacrificing it to the Phyrexian Altar. So Rooftop Storm, it just goes into so many different things that really you can find almost any use for it. So each of these combos is equally deadly and equally viable, with each part still working separately from the deck as individual cards and not pieces. So Wilhelt and the Puppet Factory. The Puppet Stitcher could get us a couple of tokens here and there. We're going to want to play at least some amounts of instants and sorceries in order to play removal, card draw, that sort of stuff. The Puppet Factory, just lording all of our tokens, even just turning them all into 3/3s. That's pretty good even on its own, even without going infinite in any kind of way. Gravecrawler, we've got a lot of sacrifice synergies in the deck, so we want cards that we can replay. Phyrexian Altar, we want something to sacrifice our creatures to. And Rooftop Storm, it's just an insanely good card. It's just a really good value card for zombies. So Tribal, one of our first themes, we want to make our zombies bigger. We want to add additional effects to all of our zombies to make them more threatening and to add more board presence. So the first thing that I've wrote down here is Lords. I'm not going to go over any of these in depth. I'm just going to name them off and they'll show up on the screen. Liliana's Mastery, Lord of the Accursed, Lord of the Undead, Narthi Betrayer King, Risen Executioner, Tomb Tyrant, Undead Warchief, Blade Stitched Scab, Cemetery Reaper, Death Baron, Direcraft Captain, and Death Priest of Merkel. Lords are one of the most obvious addition, especially to pump our Decayed tokens. So Wilhelt gives us Decayed tokens. It doesn't give us regular creature tokens. So we want to be able to make the little use of these dying creatures as we can. So making them bigger in combat and then swinging in with them, even though they're going to die, they could trade with something, get a bunch of damage, since they're even less than real tokens. Lords are just the most obvious addition to any tribal deck, especially zombies. Zombies has a lot of different lords. There are even more that I didn't name here. And then some other really good tribal cards that I've got here, they can add to our card draw. So card draw is an essential part of any commander deck, and these next couple of cards that I'm going to talk about can give us plenty of gas. So the first one is the Undead Auger. It is 2 black for a creature, zombie, wizard. It's a 2/2. Whenever Undead Auger or another zombie you control dies, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So with all the creatures that we're sacrificing, this card is going to keep our hand plenty stocked with more threats to play. And it also triggers for every zombie, not just non-token. So all of the Decayed zombies that are going to die in combat, all of the regular zombies that we're going to be sacrificing and then bring back. Undead Auger will trigger for all of them, keeping our hand full of cards. The next one is the Graveborn Muse, which is 2 a black and a black. For a creature, it's a zombie spirit. It's also a 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of zombies you control. So our board should be plenty full of zombies, letting us draw maybe 4, 5, even more additional cards every turn. It is important, though, to be a little careful of that life loss, since if we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zombies on the board, we are drawing that many cards, but we're also losing that much life. So that can become pretty dangerous pretty quickly. But on the plus side, you can sacrifice the Graveborn Muse to whatever you want if you find that you're losing a little bit too much life. And then another card draw engine that goes with a large board is Cryptbreaker. It is a single black mana. It's from an Innistrad set itself. It is a creature, zombie, obviously. It's a 1/1. It has 1 and a black, tap it, discard a card, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, and it also has tap 3 untapped zombies you control. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. So the Cryptbreaker lets you tap zombies that you're not going into combat with to find some additional gas. And you can also tap zombies to Cryptbreaker and then sacrifice them to another effect. So the Cryptbreaker gives us a lot of dual usage. So you can tap 3 zombies to Cryptbreaker, draw a card, and then sacrifice those 3 decayed zombies to something else, the Phyrexian altar maybe, get 3 mana, and then draw 3 more cards with the Undead Auger. And then you also have 3 mana to play an additional threat from your hand, maybe one that you drew off of one of these really good engines. And then some interesting cards that I don't really see played or mentioned too often in zombie tribal decks. There's some zombie themed blood artists. So these next 3 creatures that I'm going to talk about, whenever zombies die, they make our opponents lose life. Since our deck relies heavily on sacrificing, getting in some extra damage is going to be really beneficial and help close the games if we can't combo. So the first one is Plague Belcher. It's 2 and a black for a creature, zombie beast. It's a 5/4. It has menace. When the Plague Belcher enters the battlefield, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. And whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So if we have, say, our main combo with Wilhelt and the Puppet Factory, and we have a Plague Belcher out, all of those decayed tokens that we're sacrificing suddenly turns into damage with the Plague Belcher, or the Vengeful Dead, which is 3 and a black for a creature zombie. It's a 3/2. Whenever Vengeful Dead or another zombie is put into a graveyard from play, each opponent loses 1 life. And then the last one is Direcraft Captain, which I mentioned earlier in the Lords section. So the Direcraft Captain is definitely a really good include since it's got that kind of dual usage. So it's 1, a blue, and a black for a creature, zombie soldier. It's a 2/2. It has Death Touch. Other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life. So, since we are sacrificing so many creatures all the time, and it's a really big part of the deck, getting in for some extra damage is going to be really helpful. And then, if you want to lean more heavily into the life drain aspect of the deck, some other cards to consider are going to be Ayara and Bantu's Monument. And I'm just going to put them up on the screen here. Both of these cards, they just kind of do the same thing. Whenever a creature enters or you cast a creature, your opponents will lose life and you'll gain life. So now on to the sacrifice portion of the deck. You're probably already thinking of these cards because they're such powerful cards. They're really well-known cards, and a few of them are actually pretty important. I'm not going to go too in-depth about these just because they're really powerful for a reason. We've got the Altar of Dementia, the Ashnod's Altar, and the Phyrexian Altar. So the Altar of Dementia, you sacrifice creatures and you get to mill players equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar give you colorless mana and colored mana, respectively. So these are some important combos. For instance, Phyrexian Altar and Gravecrawler, that goes infinite. If you have Altar of Dementia and the Wilhelt Poppet Factory combo, then that wins you right on the spot. Ashnod's Altar is just really good value. And these are some usual suspects. You'll find these in almost any sacrifice-based deck. These cards are absolutely the best sacrifice outlets that exist. Being able to add mana to play more threats in order to sacrifice more things, in order to replay more things is really good. Altar of Dementia we can even use on ourselves in order to get more cards in our graveyard. Maybe help to get that Gravecrawler in there, some other cards that we can reanimate later. And then some more on-theme sacrifice cards. As I was going through a lot of the zombie cards as I was making the list, as I was making my notes, there are actually quite a few creatures that want to sacrifice specifically zombies, or that care about zombies in a sacrificial way. So the first one is Ghoulcaller Giza. She is 3, a black and a black. For a legendary creature, human wizard, pay 1 black, tap her, and sacrifice another creature. You create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. I almost forgot to mention that she is a 3/4. So Giza, lore-wise, flavor-wise, automatically has to go in the deck. She's really cool with zombies, and she makes our board bigger and bigger and bigger, adding to the threat while giving us sacrifice triggers. And depending on the size of some of these creatures that we're sacrificing, she can give us a lot of 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and then we can sacrifice those to something and get even more creature tokens with Decayed, and then sacrifice all of those to something. So Giza just gives us a bigger and bigger board. The second one is Carnion Feeder, which is a zombie itself. It's a single black for a creature zombie. It's a 1/1. Carnion Feeder can't block, and you sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Carnion Feeder. So the Carnion Feeder only puts counters on itself. However, it is a free sacrifice outlet, which I do really like, meaning it doesn't actually cost us anything to sacrifice our creatures to it. So Ghoulcaller Giza, she needs us to have a black mana, and you need to tap Giza and sacrifice a creature, and then you get the effect. But with Carnion Feeder, you can just sacrifice all your creatures to it. It makes a really big attacker as well. Up next is a new card, also from Midnight Hound Commander. It's the Cleaver Scav. So it is 3 and a blue for a creature, a zombie horror. It's a 2/4. Pay 3, tap it, and sacrifice another zombie. You create 2 tokens that are copies of the sacrificed creature. So as an actual sacrifice outlet, I don't think it is that good. Just because it costs a lot of mana in order to activate. You have to tap the creature in order to use it. We do want to sacrifice zombies though, so that's not that much of a downside. But it is just kind of a lot of work to put into it. The reason I included it though, and the reason why I like it, is because depending on the zombie that you sacrifice, you get 2 tokens that are copies of that creature. So if you sacrifice one of the lords, Direcraft Captain, for example, so then you will get 2 Direcraft Captains, which means that other zombies you control are getting +2/+2 instead of just +1/+1. And whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses 2 life instead of just 1. And we still have other synergies that we can use in order to get the creature that we sacrificed back onto the board. So then we'll have 3 Direcraft Captains instead of only 1. So that's why I think that Cleaver Scav is a good addition, just because it kind of doubles up on a lot of some important triggers. Corpse Harvester, which is 3, a black and a black. For a creature, a zombie wizard, it's a 3/3. You pay 1, a black, tap the Corpse Harvester, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a zombie card and a swamp card, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So, as a sacrifice outlet, Again, I don't think the Corpse Harvester is that good. However, just because of the utility that it provides, I'm including it, because getting to search your library for any zombie card and putting it into your hand is really good. This can help you find your Gravecrawler. It can help you find any one of your lords. It can help you find a Direcraft Captain so that you can get some additional triggers. It can help you find that Undead Auger, the Cryptbreaker, any of that kind of stuff. The next one is Grin, Corpseborn. He is 3, a blue and a black. For a legendary creature, he's a zombie warrior and a 5/5. So Grin enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. You sacrifice another creature, untap Grin, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Grin attacks, destroy target creature defending player controls, then put a +1/+1 counter on Grin. So this one is definitely one of the better sacrifice outlets that I've talked about, at least in the zombie kind of theme, because first of all, it is free. It is very much the same as Carnion Feeder, however, so it only makes Grin bigger, but it is a free sacrifice outlet, so we can just sacrifice our other creatures to it. And whenever Grin attacks, you destroy a creature that player controls, and you make him bigger. So Grin is a huge threat on his own, and just a really good sacrifice outlet. Grin can almost take over the entire game himself until your opponents deal with it, but even then, he won't stay dead because of all the graveyard synergies that I'm going to talk about later, so you can always just get him back out. The next one is a very interesting combo piece, but also a really great sacrifice outlet. It's Blasting Station, which is just 3 mana for an artifact. It has tap, sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. So, from a combo perspective, let's say that you have Wilhelt and the Puppet Factory and the Blasting Station. So, somehow, you sacrifice a zombie. You sacrifice a zombie to the Blasting Station, you deal 1 damage to something, you get a Decayed token, which comes into play, so then the Blasting Station will untap, and then you can sacrifice that Decayed token to then deal a damage to something else, and because the Puppet Factory says that that creature didn't have Decayed, Wilhelt triggers again, so then you get another token, which in turn untaps the Blasting Station, you can sacrifice it to something else. So you can sacrifice real creatures to trigger the station multiple times, and then when the tokens come into play from Wilhelt, then you can stack all the triggers and sacrifice all the tokens to it as well. So you can deal a ton of damage with Blasting Station. You can take out specific threats by dealing damage to them. You might even be able to take out a player or two with some of the loops that you can do with Blasting Station, or just with getting a lot of damage on the board. And Blasting Station's value increases even more when you add one of our kind of zombie blood artists, Plague Belcher, Vengeful Dead, Direcraft Captain, because then you're dealing twice as much damage to whatever you want. And then the last sacrifice outlet, okay, it's absolutely not the best sacrifice outlet at all. There are a lot of other ones that you can play that are a lot better than this, but I really like this card. So it's Vampiric Rights. It's only a single black. It's an enchantment, and it has 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So, I have loved this card since I started playing Magic. I've played this card when I started playing Magic. I had a green-black sacrifice deck. I really liked this card. I do think that it is good enough to see play. It is minimal life gain and only a little bit of card draw, but it does give us some sacrifice triggers, and it does give us a little bit of an upside to doing it. I do think that the life gain will help at least a little bit, just because there are a lot of other cards that are going to make us lose life. The Undead Auger, the Graveborn Muse. But I do think that just because it is a single black, it's really good. I think if it were any mana more, I wouldn't like it at all. It is a little bit mana intensive. It's 2 mana to sacrifice a creature, but the upside of gaining a little bit of life and drawing a card, I think it's worth at least trying. So, after we sacrifice all of our creatures, the question is, how exactly are we going to be getting them back? So that's what this next section is going to be all about. It's all about getting creatures back from the graveyard. So this first sacrifice outlet is actually very similar to Vampiric Rights, which is why I think that Vampiric Rights deserves some play, because this next card sees a lot of play, and it kind of does the same thing. It's Phyrexian Reclamation. So it's a single black for an enchantment. For 1 and a black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a single mana for an enchantment that you have to pay 2 mana to do an action to. And that's kind of why I think Vampiric Rights deserves its right in the sun, because the 2 cards are very similar in their cost. And Phyrexian Reclamation sees a lot of play. It's exactly the kind of card that goes into almost any sacrifice deck. We want to be able to get all those creatures back that we keep recurring, and having something on our board that we can pay to over and over and over and over and over again to get all those creatures back is just really good repeatable value. It's cheap, it's efficient, a classic include in any sacrifice deck. Getting our threats back over and over is exactly what we want. So, the next card, one that's a little bit pricey, at least with actual money, but one that I haven't seen see almost any play. I don't think I've ever seen this card on the opposite side of me. It's Oversold Cemetery. So, it's 1 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So, it's very similar to Phyrexian Reclamation, is that it just sits on the board and gets you the repeatable value. But it doesn't require any additional work, which is why I think that it's a really interesting card. You do have to have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, but if we're sacrificing all our creatures anyway, that shouldn't be a problem. And especially with having Oversold Cemetery on our board, it shouldn't be an issue to get all those creatures back that we're sacrificing anyway. I really like the mana cost of this card too. It's only 2 mana. And the requirement for getting your creatures back, like I said, it's not going to be that hard. It's only 4. The creatures go right back in your hand. You can recast them. I really like this card because it's just cheap. It's repeatable. It doesn't need any additional investment like Phyrexian Reclamation does. It only just sits on the board and it just generates you value. So this next reanimation card, the next graveyard card, I'm really not sure how I feel about it. But I guess we'll see. So it's Dawn of the Dead. It is 2 mana and triple black, so 5 mana overall. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That creature gains haste until end of turn. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So, I'm really not sure how I feel about this card being 5 mana and the life loss. Triple black, I also feel like, is a little bit iffy. I'm really iffy about this card, especially the exile clause. So it does directly return our creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is good, and it gives them haste, which is also good. And with our sacrifice effects, it shouldn't be too costly to be able to get around the exile clause, because it doesn't say exile it if it would go anywhere else. It only says exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So you should be able to avoid exiling the creatures pretty easily, and returning a creature to the battlefield for free every single turn does seem pretty good. I'm still kind of iffy about this card, but it seems decent enough. So the next one is Malevolent Awakening. It is 1 a black and a black for an enchantment. It has 1 a black and a black. Sacrifice a creature. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So when I first read this card, it just seems like a lot of work, right? In order to get any value from it immediately, you have to have 6 mana overall. So, which maybe you aren't. Maybe you're playing this early and then you're just kind of setting up for some future turns. But 3 mana and sacrifice a creature to get a creature card back seems very steep. However, it is also a sacrifice outlet. So, getting to sacrifice a decayed creature for 3 mana and then returning like a Plague Belcher and replaying the Plague Belcher doesn't seem like that terrible of a sequence of events. I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I still feel like it's really intensive. I think that if it was maybe 2 mana or 1 mana, sacrifice a creature, I think that it would definitely be worth it. At 3, I think it starts to at least get a little sketchy. But I do definitely think that it is at least worth considering. So these next couple of cards are some doozies. So I'm actually going to talk about each of these cards individually because I think that they have a few noticeable differences to them. So the first one is, thank goodness, a reprint from Modern Horizons 2. It is Patriarchs Bidding. It's 3, a black and a black for sorcery. Each player chooses a creature type. Each player returns all creature types of a type chosen this way from their graveyard to the battlefield. I think that this card is both good and bad. It's good because it lets us just straight up return every single one of our zombies to the graveyard to the battlefield. Get a bunch of sacrifice triggers, get a bunch of decayed zombies, sacrifice those as well, blasting station, altar of dementia, shenanigans. However, it does say each player. So if your opponents are also playing tribal decks, dragons, vampires, I think we're getting vampires in, I think it's called Crimson Vow in the next Innistrad set. So those might be coming around pretty soon. Edgar Markov, I'm sure, is still really popular. The Ur-Dragon also is. So it's powerful, especially for the mana cost. It's 5 mana, basically return your entire graveyard to the battlefield. But I do feel like it's just something to kind of be aware of and to be careful with. The next one is very similar. A little more mana intensive, but I think it's better because it's only one-sided. It's Haunting Voyage from Kaldheim. It is 4, a black and a black for sorcery. You choose a creature type, return up to 2 creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if this spell was foretold, you return all creatures of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. And it has Foretell for 5, a black and a black. So during your turn, you can pay 2 mana and exile the Haunting Voyage face down, and you can cast it on a later turn for the Foretell cost. So it's 2 more mana than the Patriarchs Bidding, but it does only let you reanimate your entire board. So you reanimate your entire board, you do the same thing. Altar of Dementia shenanigans, phyrexian altar shenanigans, blasting station shenanigans, all that kind of stuff. The last one is kind of in between both Patriarchs Bidding and Haunting Voyage. It's Zombie Apocalypse. So it's 3 and triple black, 6 mana total. For a sorcery, you return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, then you destroy all humans. So it's just another mass reanimation spell that you can use. It is 6 mana, so it's a little bit better than Patriarchs Bidding, because it just counts for our zombies only, our creatures only. And it's a little bit better than Haunting Voyage because it's less mana intensive. It's only 6 mana as opposed to 7. And then the last way that we can get our creatures back from the graveyard is to straight up just cast them from the graveyard. So the first one is Gisa and Geralf, which is 2, a blue and a black for a legendary creature, human wizard. When Gisa and Geralf enters the battlefield, you mill 4 cards. And then during each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard, which is really, really good. So this is one of the ways that makes Cleaver Scav a lot better. So we can sacrifice one of our real creatures to Cleaver Scav, make some copies of it, and then during one of our turns, we can just recast it from our graveyard with Gisa and Geralf. And we can do that over and over and over and over and over again, getting a ton of different tokens, getting a ton of different triggers, a ton of different support from the Scav. And this is kind of why I thought that it was good enough to have in, because doubling up all of our creatures, especially our really good like lords and stuff like that, is just really good value. And with all of the graveyard cards that we have, oversold cemetery, all of our mass reanimation spells, haunting voyage, zombie apocalypse, those things, even just Gisa and Geralf, we're getting to return all those creatures from the graveyard back to the battlefield, so it's not really even like we lost anything. And we still get sacrifice creatures, so we're still getting zombie tokens every time we do this. So then the next one is Liliana, Untouched by Death. So Liliana is 2 a black and a black for a legendary planeswalker, Liliana. She comes in with 4 loyalty. +1, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. If at least one of them is a zombie card, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So that right there is super good. It chips in for a little bit more damage. And it will gain us a little bit of life because we have a lot of cards in this deck that'll actually make us lose life. Things like the Undead Auger, the Dawn of the Dead, stuff like that. -2, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of zombies you control. This is also really good. She comes in, she removes a threat. We might have 10, 15, 20 zombies. We might only have 4 or 5. Still, giving a creature -4, -4 is pretty good. Grasp of Darkness was played in Standard for a really long time. And the last ability, the real reason why we're playing it, -3, you may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. So this is repeatable as well. As long as Liliana sits on the board, we can play her -3 and then play something, and then play a bunch of zombie spells from our graveyard this turn. So the difference is, Gisa and Geralf says you may cast a zombie from your graveyard during each of your turns. When you minus Liliana, you can cast as many zombies from your graveyard as you have mana to. So, depending on what you actually have, Liliana actually gives us some other combos because she lets us play them directly from our graveyard. So, for instance, if we have Carnion Feeder and the Phyrexian Altar, we can sacrifice the Carnion Feeder to Phyrexian Altar, get 1 black, activate Liliana, and then recast the Carnion Feeder, so then it almost becomes a Gravecrawler. So that's why Liliana is really good. And as long as she sits on the board, we can continue ticking her up, putting cards into our graveyard, putting zombies into our yard, draining our opponents, and then we can minus her again and get another really big value turn where we just cast a bunch of zombies from our graveyard, and Liliana fuels that negative ability by directly milling us. So both of these cards straight up just let us cast zombies from our graveyard, and they are really the best kind of reanimation too. And since we are still a zombie tribal deck, I felt the need to add in some zombies that we can directly play or get back from our graveyard, since they are going to be the best kind of fodder for a lot of our effects. So the first one is Gravecrawler. Gravecrawler is incredibly obvious, right? We have to have this card. It's one of the best zombies that we can have. Automatically it goes in. It's part of one of our combos. It's really obvious. Another one that's actually from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, it's a new one. It is Evendeath Draco Lich. So Evendeath is 2 a black and a black for a legendary creature, a zombie dragon. He's a 5/2. He's got flash and flying. He enters tapped, and you can cast Evendeath from your graveyard if a creature not named Evendeath died this turn. So as long as you sacrifice something else, you can recast evendeath from your graveyard and then sacrifice evendeath to something else. So evendeath is just really good sacrifice fodder. And he's also got a pretty sizable body. It is a zombie, which is really good. It also has flying, which I actually really like. It's got a little bit of evasion on it. Another one is Hakken, Stromgold Scourge. He's 1 a black and a black for a legendary creature zombie knight. He's a 3/3. So you can play Hakken from your graveyard, but not from anywhere else. So if you got him in your hand, too bad. As long as Hakken is in play, you can play knight cards from your graveyard. Not really that relevant. When Hakken is put into a graveyard from play, you lose 2 life. So this one is kind of very iffy. If you decide to go with a lot more mill cards in order to self-mill, then Hakken gets a little bit better, but honestly, I don't think it's that good. But I did think that just because it was a zombie that you can cast from your graveyard, I did feel like it was at least worth mentioning. The next one is very similar, actually, to Gisa and Geralf and Liliana. It's the Haven Ghoul Lich, which is 3 a blue and a black for a creature zombie wizard. If you pay 1 mana, just of any color, you may cast target creature card in a graveyard this turn. When you cast that card this turn, Haven Ghoul Lich gains all activated abilities of that card until end of turn. It is a 4/4. I almost forgot to mention that. But Haven Ghoul Lich basically says, all the creature cards in your graveyard, you can cast them from your graveyard as long as you pay 1 additional mana. It also has the added bonus of letting us cast cards from our opponent's graveyards as well. So I think it's got some dual usage. It's a little expensive. It is 5 mana, but the ability to be able to cast any of our creatures from our graveyard again is really good. So with Haven Ghoul Lich, I'm not sure if we can pass up that kind of effect. The next one is a little bit of a workaround. However, I do think that it is very good sacrifice fodder. It's the prized Amalgam. It's 1 a blue and a black for a creature zombie. It's a 3/3. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered the battlefield from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, return prized Amalgam from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. So we have a creature token with Decayed. We have a zombie creature token with Decayed from Wilhelt. So we sacrifice it to something. We cast evendeath, Draco Lich from our graveyard. We pass the turn. Prized Amalgam comes back from our graveyard back onto the board. So then we've got 2 recursive threats on the board. We can sacrifice both of them. We'll get 2 Decayed Zombies. At the start of our turn, we sacrifice a Decayed Zombie again. We get evendeath back, and we get the Prized Amalgam back. Prized Amalgam is just one of those really good cards that just keeps coming back over and over and over again. And that's why Dredge in almost any format, as much as my memory serves, is an absolute 4 of and an auto include. So the last one, or one of the last ones, that does actually play double duty. It's both a lord and a creature that we can get back. So it's the Risen Executioner. It is 2 a black and a black for a creature, zombie warrior. It's a 4/3. Risen Executioner can't block. Other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1, which is really good. And you may cast Risen Executioner from your graveyard if you pay 1 mana more to cast it for each other creature card in your graveyard. So Risen Executioner can get pretty mana intensive pretty quickly. However, I do think that being a recursive lord is incredibly good. So we can just replay the Risen Executioner, buff our entire team. I don't think that it makes incredibly good sacrifice fodder just because of how mana intensive the Risen Executioner can become. But being a lord that is recursive, I do think that it's really good. We already want to play the recursive the Risen Executioner anyway, just because it's a Lord to begin with, and the fact that we can replay it from our graveyard later just makes it even better. So this next one is actually a new card from Modern Horizons 2. It is the Master of Death. It's 1, a blue and a black for a creature zombie wizard. It's a 3/1. When Master of Death enters the battlefield, you surveil 2. So you look at the top 2 cards of your library, and you may put any number of those into your graveyard. And the rest can just stay on the top of your library. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Master of Death is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return it to your hand. So sacrifice Master of Death to Blasting Station, phyrexian altar, something. Get a decayed zombie, and then pass the turn. Upkeep, pay 1, return it to the hand, replay it, get a little bit of card selection out of it as well, sacrifice it again. Master of Death is really similar to Squee, actually. I really like it. And then the last card is a card that I actually had, and I played when I first started playing Magic. It went very well with my Vampiric Rights. It is the Relentless Dead. So it's just a black and a black for a creature zombie. It's a 2/2. It has Menace. When Relentless Dead dies, you may pay a single black. If you do, return it to its owner's hand. So you can sacrifice the Relentless Dead to Phyrexian Altar, and then use the black mana that you make in order to return it to your hand. And then when Relentless Dead dies, you may pay X. If you do, return another target zombie creature card with a converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield. That is one of the things about the Relentless Dead that I really like, is that it plays some double duty. So you can keep returning the Relentless Dead to your hand, you can keep replaying it, it makes really good sacrifice fodder, or you can just straight up have it die and have it return something else, one of your lords that isn't recursive. So I think that Relentless Dead is pretty flexible, and I think that it has a lot of utility. Now, some of the combos that I did talk about in this episode can go in any number of zombie decks, but personally, I feel like Wilhelt and his theme of whenever zombies die, you get more, is able to fit a lot of these pieces better as not just combo cards, but also as standalone cards. And each part of the different combos provides its own level of synergy, which offers a lot more for the deck than just a blank card that wins the game under the right circumstances. So, for instance, one of the friends in my play group, he has a Varina deck. So he's got the Gravecrawler, Phyrexian Altar combo in that deck. I've never actually seen him play it, but it really doesn't seem like it fits the synergy of that deck that much. He personally went with a lot more of a token theme. He makes a lot more tokens. He's usually sacrificing tokens. So the Gravecrawler doesn't seem like it does a whole lot for his deck. However, if you're playing Wilhelt, whenever you sacrifice something, you get another zombie onto the board. So it's got the same sort of token synergies, but it comes with a lot more other value because of the Gravecrawler. We want creatures to die anyway, so having Gravecrawler means that we just get to put it back into play. Having Phyrexian Altar is a way that we can get rid of all of our creatures, and so on and so forth with, Rooftop Storm, the Puppet Factory, stuff like that. So, what do you think of Wilhelt? Do you think that Wilhelt is the best zombie commander that we've seen in a while, or do you think he's the best one that we've seen all time, or do you feel like he's being over-exaggerated? Do you think that he makes a better zombie commander than others in the past? And which zombies will you be adding into the 99 other than a lot of the ones that I've talked about today? Let me know what you think. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time when we enter the Infinite.